Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Adam, Old Man Winners. I'm Joe Gould. Today we're talking about The Evil of Frankenstein by Universal Films. Hammer Films.
Yeah, yeah. Hard to say which one it really is, Universal or Hammer.
Yeah, it's kind of the least well thought of all the Hammer Frankenstein films. I think that's a well-deserved critique. There's still a few we haven't watched, so we can reserve judgment on whether or not it's actually the worst. But it's definitely underwhelming.
Well, it's ironic because they weren't at all worried about getting sued over anything in this movie.
Yeah, which actually I think is probably the problem.
Hmm.
They lost the need to be original and artistic. It's almost like, and I don't know if Universal was pressuring them, but it's almost like they were being pressured to make a remake of the 33, Urge 34, whatever it was.
It's close. I was thinking it was 32, but
That might be right. I'm not an expert on the Universal films, and I don't have that in front of me. But yeah, so as a point of reference, this is the first Frankenstein film that was being distributed by Universal Films, who created all the great 30 monster movies that you typically think of. If you had to ask someone on the street, "Hey, those old monster movies, Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman," like they're thinking probably of the Universal Films.
yep.
Hammer's more of a niche kind of thing, and like we talked about before, kind of lost to time in a lot of ways.
No single one stop to get them all together because of the American distribution licenses.
Yeah, and then basically because they didn't have Universal before, for all the other Frankenstein movies, they went out of their way to make sure that they did not infringe on copyright.
Or trademark.
So they had trademark, yeah, all that good stuff. So that you had a different shape for Frankenstein's forehead, so to speak. The plot points, they could be from the book, obviously, but they couldn't be things unique to the Universal film. And because of that, we had some really creative movies. They're really good, but because they took a different spin on a classic monster, and they really did emphasize the Dr. Frankenstein character as opposed to the monster, in terms of a developing character out of it.
I will speak in favor of this movie, though, as I have complained in the previous two Hammer Frankenstein movies, much as I might like the casting, much as I might like the story, the spectacle has been lacking in the previous ones. This one does not have that problem. This movie does have spectacle in our monster engagements.
Yeah, and it had to go alongside that, it had a bigger budget, which was, he had some really nice sets. He had a bunch of extras. I think we had the first mob scene.
Officially,
It's really
yeah, I
unfortunate.
mentioned.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I mentioned at the end of Revenge of Frankenstein, there was sort of a makeshift grassroots mob in the the poor hospital ward, but this one is more along the lines of what you'd think of as an actual angry mob.
Yeah, and now, unfortunately, the monster himself. I mean, if you took a 10-year-old and you gave him some Play-Doh, and then you gave him a guy and said, "Go make a mask on this guy's face using this Play-Doh," that's a kind of roughly what it looked like. And apparently the kid ran out when they got to the chin, because there's basically no mask on the chin. It's like a Batman mask almost in terms of the face coverage.
I'll mention
It's just really
Batman
poorly
later again
made.
in this movie, but keep on going there.
Yeah, so I found an article on Bloody Disgusting, and they were really reviewing the Blu-ray that Shout put out a few years ago, which I did not have, by the way. And I can't. I'm not. I think this is the author's word. I don't think this is from the Blu-ray. But I guess Roy Ashton was given the task of crafting the look of the monster, and I think they were trying to bring the original of I don't know his first name, Pierce's work with the first film, the classic Universal film, along with what Hammer was trying to pull off with their films. And apparently they made about 200 attempts at a design, and the producers just really couldn't decide on what they wanted. So after that, he crafted a scale model, and they generally liked it, I guess. But then the various producers from Universal and Hammer continued to make changes to request changes, and thinking that this stuff could get turned around really quickly. And then I guess it was only a few days until the shoot they made a decision to use what they did, and makeup was disappointing to say the least.
Now, you kicked around the idea that if social media had existed in 1964, the backlash may have motivated them to change the monster design.
Yeah, I was chatting with you earlier, and it kind of thought this needed the Sonic backlash.
Yeah,
Where they went and they redid the Sonic character from terms of the CGI to make it more pleasant to look at. I mean, you don't want to be watching a movie and be thinking, man, Sonic's got odd calf muscles, right? We don't even watch a Frankenstein movie and be thinking, I can see the man's chin underneath the mask, or it looks like they took the original. Let's say they made a model of the original Universal Frankenstein, and then they took the cast from that and they just left it outside in the rain for 20 years. And then they reused the same one for this movie. It's kind of a similar look. The problem is now other movies have done that, like Halloween with Michael Myers. It works a little better in that because it's an actual mask. This is supposed to be the guy's face.
It does have a paper mache quality like you would make for your elementary school show and tell day or whatever it was we would do. Didn't you ever work with paper mache in those years?
Yeah, I did.
Use old toilet paper rolls or stuff like that, and then maybe.
Here's the other thing too. So the Hammer films definitely they kind of rein in the fantasy elements of the Frankenstein movies. They make it. They attempt to make it a little more rooted in reality. I think there's a grit to it, a realism kind of thing they're pushing. They're not trying to push so many things over the top. There's no Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. Like there's multiple things from that.
Man.
Yeah, well, you get what I'm saying. So
I hear you.
The giant forehead works a lot better in our true fantasy world.
Yeah.
If you're trying to root something in reality and you're saying they're using real body parts, I don't even understand. Like, what body part did he use for the forehead? Did he graft muscle from the forearm or something? Like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Even if it looked good, it would not look good or fit for this movie, I think.
Nothing about the design of the creature suggests Dr. Frankenstein is an expert surgeon, as we've been conditioned to think in the previous movies.
In his defense, this is more of a prototype monster, which we can get into continuity here in a few minutes. But this, it's not his finished form, which is a little bit odd after the last couple of movies.
Oh, he has. I never thought about him being able to improve because Frankenstein seemed pretty happy with his monster in the flashback sequence in this movie when he powers him up the first time.
Well, but I think that he viewed this monster more like he did in The Curse of Frankenstein, where he wants to make the ideal man. He realizes quickly that there's ways to improve, but he Frankenstein in all the films, and maybe we'll see about the later ones, but so far, he's very respectful of his creations.
Yes.
Treats them well.
Distinct from the book. It's the real Curse of Frankenstein in the book, but he loves his work in these movies.
Yes.
All of them.
So, to kind of set the movie in terms of like the making of it, just a few more things, add a little flesh to it, so to speak. Ooh. So you had The Curse of Frankenstein, was it 58? 57? Something like that? The Revenge of Frankenstein in 58.
58, yeah.
Yeah, 58. But then in 1960, Brides of Dracula was released, and Peter Cushing was afraid of getting typecast, so he stepped away from horror films for a while.
He was in Brides of Dracula.
Yes, but after that, he was afraid of getting typecast, and he did some other films for Hammer, but it was a different kind of roles.
Night Creatures, maybe? Was he one of those there?
So I got a list here on this.
I like night
The Sword of
creatures.
Sherwood Forest, Cash on
Oh,
Demand, Captain Clegg. I have no idea what that's
oh,
about. Interesting title.
yeah.
But
The
anyways,
fact that
going
we
back
don't
to being
remember
Baron
these speaks
Frankenstein.
about, yeah.
Well, in all due respect, we most people don't know about the good Hammer films. And I'm not
All
saying
right.
those aren't good, but in terms of the lower
But
of the totem pole, so
everybody
to speak.
knows he was Dr. Frankenstein. I shouldn't say everybody, but people at least
Yes,
know he did them.
yes. And apparently there was going to be a Tales of Frankenstein pilot. I really wonder if that would have been
This a
like the
TV
Incredible
show?
Hulk. It was going to be a TV show, and it was not
Good
picked up though
idea.
for a series run. It is a good idea.
Huh.
I came up with it last week, not even knowing that this existed. I
Or it
learned
didn't
about that this
exist,
week.
but somebody wanted it to exist.
Well, interesting enough. All right, so on the Shout Blu-ray, again, which I do not have, apparently the pilot episode is on there.
Well, that's worth tracking it down then.
Yeah, the pilot that didn't get picked up. And also, it sounds like, and so, anyways, real quick. So 6 years later, they end up making this film, 1964. So there is a gap. You can actually see it in Cushing that he's aged a little bit. He's definitely a little grayer. And my understanding is that they used one of the plots or one of the scripts for one of those Tales of Frankenstein episodes that didn't get picked up, and they reworked it into this film. There's a lot of back and forth on the making it, but it's amazing. They had 6 years to make this movie, and they still had to end up rushing things because they just weren't organized. So there was the costume for the monster or the script, and it really does come across in this movie. The pacing's weird. It kind of does feel for like a made-for-TV movie, or like a two-parter Incredible Hulk episode back in the day. Bill Bixby running from the reporter, and
Now I
I feel
recall
like the movie
something.
never gets a flow.
I recall something I read on Wikipedia because that's the extent of my research. There was an extended edition of this that aired on NBC in 1968. Never heard
Yes,
anything about that. I'm wondering if it has bonus features on the Blu-ray.
it is on the Blu-ray, the
Man,
extra 10 minutes, and I can't remember
that's a
where I
lot.
read this. Yeah, so basically, again, I haven't seen this because it wasn't on the version I saw. But basically, the 10 minutes further develops the character of the girl,
Oh,
and basically shows her getting scared as a young child, and that is why she is deaf and why she is mute.
and if they filmed it after the movie, they wouldn't have to bring the original actress back. They could just recast and make it a flashback.
Correct. And I'm pretty sure it's all flashbacks. I'm not 100% sure again because I haven't seen it. So if they did
Well,
bring the main character back, it wouldn't have been for very much, I don't think. But I guess her
sounds like it.
father was infatuated with with Baron Frankenstein also. So it sounds like a real similar scene to the beginning of the movie. Only instead of the body getting stolen, she runs into the monster, scares her to death, and then I'm not sure why she's attached to it, so to speak, later on. But yeah,
Well, that's admirable, but it doesn't sound to me like it's going to make the movie any better. Like a true deleted footage or anything.
this movie as is could have stood to take out, I think, about 10 minutes.
Mm.
But again, I think it felt kind of like 2 1 hour episodes of a show. So maybe
Hmm.
kind of like we talked about with one of the Godzilla films, like they were shoving a little too much in here. You could have made it a two-parter and added a little bit to each movie, and it might have been easier for the audience to sit through and just make the movie shorter, or two-part episodes, that kind of thing. I think it would have worked better for television, though.
Probably.
You need commercial breaks to break it up for you.
Yep. Yep. So Hans is back. That's a puzzling decision, but the actor's not back.
I feel like the new one, he had the personality of somebody who had a lobotomy.
Maybe he did.
The mute and the deaf girl showed more personality than Hans. Speaking of which, that does remind me, on the Blu-ray, which again I don't have, they have an interview with I lost her name, Katie
She's
Wilde,
like Katie
who played the
Wilde,
girl.
or Katie Wilde, the girl.
I would say Katie, but there's only one T. But yeah, so they had an interview with her, and she discussed the seriousness with which she had the part, and just really trying to make an authentic performance. I didn't catch this first time I read it. Apparently, the reason her character had no dialogue was that the producers wanted the script to be easier to write.
Oh, yeah, sure. They only had 6
That's
years to
lazy.
do it. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I will say she's a much more interesting character since she can't talk. But
Yeah,
that's a
she
really
does the best
bad
job of all
reason.
the female leads in this that we've seen so far. It's unfortunate that, on the one hand, her name is never given in the theatrical film, and on the other hand, you would expect some of the characters would invent a name for her, a nickname, but it's just odd because she's staying in the chateau, Castle Frankenstein. Nobody calls her anything. Eh, I I don't know. It's just an odd
No,
writing decision.
she's like a. It's almost like she's like a stray cat just roaming around the
Yeah,
castle.
Catty Wild,
Never
the
necessarily
wild
invited.
catty,
Kind of invited
right?
herself in. They didn't bother to kick her out. I mean, obviously she's harmless. And she's not a bad character in terms of her actual character. She seems to be a good girl. But one line of dialogue would have cleaned that up. Baron saying to Hans, the girl helped us find the cave. The least we can do is keep her out of the cave. Hopefully, better dialogue than that. But something just to explain it. In one line is all they would have needed.
Yeah, she does serve a purpose in the film of being able to communicate with the creature, not significantly, but just enough to get a reaction out of him at different points, a couple points in the movie.
Well, if the ending hadn't gone like it had, we could have had the Bride of Frankenstein. How freaky would that
Well,
be?
we might get that next time. It would have been more fun, I think, to work the beggar girl into a role like that than, again, if this had been a TV series, she could have been the candidate to be the bride later on.
Yeah, they could have. They didn't do this, but they could have killed her at the end of this movie and made a sequel. Now, this movie wasn't very good, so it's probably better they didn't. But that would have been a logical thing to do if they thought this movie had legs, which, again, I don't think they thought that. I think they probably knew sending this thing out. It's like, this is not our best effort.
They gave the actress very pale-looking makeup, as if she has powdered white face, so you almost think that somebody had that idea as maybe to foreshadow, but it just didn't work out.
See here.
So continuity. Do we want to talk about?
Oh yeah, continuity.
Is this Frankenstein 3, or what is it?
It is definitely not.
I feel like this movie would have been better titled Curse of Frankenstein if we're playing with the titles and which one is appropriate. Because it feels like he is cursed in this movie, and the town is cursed.
Yeah, no, I agree. He doesn't really come across as very evil in this movie. Unless you want to say
Only
the monster
the priest
is the evil.
Well, hold on now. That opening was a little bit devious.
Yeah.
The opening to this movie.
But once you get through the opening. So anyways, back to the continuity. So I found a quote: "Any pretext of a connection to the Revenge of Frankenstein is dispensed within a brazen display of contempt for continuity. A flashback creates a prior history that is wholly unrelated to the last Sangster script and instead plundered for Universal's Frankenstein meets the Wolfman."
So the big connection, I think, with the Universal Frankenstein Wolfman is frozen in ice. That is how the creature is introduced at the beginning of Meets the Wolfman.
So you're telling me that Toho ripped off that for their Godzilla movie, Godzilla Raids Again?
Well, could be if they already had Frankenstein on the brain, but
you could say this was in an alternate universe. But the first movies did not exist. They had a flashback scene probably a little before halfway through where they show how Frankenstein creates the monster. He does it in a completely different way than he did in The Curse of Frankenstein. It is much more very Universal-esque, yeah. Um, there is a Hans, like you said. He's very much different, though he does seem to have played a similar role. I was curious as to whether or not this character was ever in a book. That was the only thing I could think of is why they would use his name.
Hans Cleaver, no, not in the first edition. I haven't read all the editions, but Crimper was in the
Okay.
book. Paul Crimper, Crimpy, Crimp, Crispy Crimp, but Hans
Yeah.
Cleaver, no.
Okay.
Not a
So
Professor Zoltan either.
yeah, yeah, I kind of figured he wasn't. But in the book, or not the book, in this movie, instead of everything that happened in the first film, he creates the monster. I forget exactly off the top of my head exactly what happened, but it kind of it gets loose, gets shot, it runs up in the mountains, and
Kills a
apparently
bunch of sheep.
kills some sheep. And then Frankenstein does not realize that he apparently fell into a big vat of ice that looked like a
Yeah,
sheet. I'm not really sure, but
convenient,
plastic
huh?
wrap.
Just
Yeah.
how it works in those mountains. We are in Sweden, I believe. The town is Karlstadt or Karlstad. Karlstad. So let me comment on
So
geography.
is that spelled the same way as in the other movie?
No. If you remember Curse of Frankenstein, it opened with saying somewhere in Sweden, excuse me, somewhere in Switzerland over 100 years ago. In the previous movie, we spent most of it in Germany, in Karlsbruck with a C.
Ah,
Karlsbruck.
okay.
So,
Okay.
and in case you're curious, the book Castle Frankenstein is located in Geneva, Switzerland. Frankenstein Victor goes to college in Ingolstadt in Germany. There's a connection. I don't think Sweden has any connection except maybe later in the book when Victor is traveling the world to get his mind. Well, it's complicated, but that may be the only time Sweden comes up. I did the Google Maps from Geneva, Switzerland to Karlstadt, Sweden. It is over 1,200 miles. That's how far we've come since, as far as retconning, even where the stuff takes place in the movie. We've really traveled some distance here.
Yeah.
Now,
So
the other thing I was wondering, the priest, I forget where we open at in this movie, what country they're supposed to be in. But Victor says in a flashback, when he's summarizing to Hans how he created the creature the first time around, that he was ultimately arrested in Karlstad because he assaulted a police officer and crimes against God. And I didn't think Sweden ever had that much of a state church that they would criminalize an act against God or
yeah, maybe they
blasphemy
got
like that.
maybe the writer got confused with Switzerland.
That would be more likely. With Geneva, but yeah, the assault on the police officer, I didn't really see it in this movie, except when he lunges at the chief of police's rifle when he's trying to shoot the creature. Is that a Scotty Scheffler situation we have here?
If only this podcast was coming out this week and not in probably 6 weeks. But
Well, no, the
talk about
legal case might
embarrassment for
still
your
be
city, by
dragging
the way.
on. Yeah.
That is true. That is true. Hope you all enjoyed your last PGA tournament, especially major.
I heard they packed it out on Sunday. I didn't get involved with it, but
I'm sure they did. Everyone wanted to see it for the last time.
so enough about my geographical ramblings. I'm sure we've lost the audience by now. Where were you going with your notes, trying to dig up continuity or whatever?
Well, I was looking for a quote that wasn't as good as I thought it was. But basically, it was the idea that they were ditching the continuity, whereas they had made an attempt to at least mostly keep it in the first two.
Yeah, some
They
light
really went full
retcons.
universal. Yeah, and so I liken this movie to kind of what happened in my mind when DC attempted to create a Marvel film universe. and they wanted to They wanted to go, and instead of making their own movies, they tried to copy the blueprint of Marvel. And you can't. There's no creativity in copying. You trace a picture and you color it. It's not going to look as good as the first one. Or if
Maybe
say
that's
if
what they were hoping.
Sega tried to create a Mario game for a Nintendo audience.
Well, they did that. The Mario Sonic at the Olympics series. They're okay. Some are better than others. They sold well. Still
I don't
going.
think that quite counts. So.
It's the only. It's official. I would liken it more to US Gold to get a little deeper video game lore. Did you ever play any games published by US Gold?
Maybe. Give me an example and I might concur.
So you may have heard of Capcom's Strider franchise that started as an arcade game. Nintendo people didn't get much, but us Sega guys, we got a little bit of Strider love. Run and gun, run and slash action adventure game. So they ported it to the Genesis, and it was a little rough around the edges, but it was well received. When it came time to make a sequel, Capcom never made an arcade sequel, not for several years. So they still wanted a console sequel for Sega, but also maybe some home computers and turbo graphics, perhaps. So a British company by the name of US Gold took a lot of the assets from the original Genesis port of Strider, recopied everything, changed some of the color palettes around, and just created another game. Called it Strider Returns. I enjoyed it myself. It had a few improvements of frame rate and all that. But most people who played it realized it had no soul because it was a copy-paste, a Frankenstein job, if you will, of previously released material.
So not quite a Doki Doki Panic turns into Super Mario 2, but similar.
Yeah, just take the spare parts and give it another go. A ROM hack, more or less.
I'm sorry. So instead of putting a new coat of paint on it, they took the sprites and just moved them around and had them do different things, basically.
There is a new coat of paint, but yeah, similar. Okay. I'll say it runs a little faster, but let's call it a level hack. It's almost like the levels got remixed into something different.
Okay.
New dungeons.
All right. Okay. I can take that. Either way, they didn't do what they do well, and they tried something different. And maybe it's because they didn't have the right script. Maybe it's because they didn't have the right director. But it didn't work out. And they went back to what they. I think they did learn their lesson, though. I haven't seen them yet, but the next movies that we'll be watching definitely are unique. They're definitely not copy and paste. And they kind of try to go back to basics in terms of Hammer films and Frankenstein. So in terms of this movie, in terms of the plot, I don't know if we really want to go through the whole thing.
Wikipedia covers that pretty well. 4 paragraphs.
Yeah. I'd say that the main unique factor in this movie is the Zoltan character.
Yeah, because they just happened to have a carnival in town, and the Baron decided to recruit him to help the monster wake up after electricity wasn't quite doing the job.
Yeah. So I guess it's to summarize the movie up to this point. Frankenstein gets caught trying to steal a corpse. So he has to run away from wherever he's at. He's broke, so he goes back to his old castle, which I think they did try to semi-model after the original, the Curse of Frankenstein, and it's not the laboratory, but the rest of the castle. And he's got lots of expensive things to sell. Yeah, so he's got lots of expensive stuff though, and he gets there, and there ain't nothing left. He's been robbed.
I'm shocked. What could have happened?
Yeah. So then he goes back to town, and he sees the Burgermeister. I'll everybody Google that. But local law enforcement.
Burgermeister.
We'll just call him the burglar.
I thought he was the Burgermeister too. The Burgermaster. It's Memorial Day coming up where we're recording at.
Yeah. So basically he's taken all of his stuff and he's put it in his little house. And Frankenstein figures this out.
There's a funny scene that comes after this.
There's quite a few funny scenes, actually.
Can
Yeah.
we
So we'll
mention
come back to
how
funny.
Frankenstein finds out that the Burgermeister has his special ring?
He's drinking sad with a mask on in a pub, and he sees the Burgermeister with his ring and a girl, his young wife.
So the camera
And
decides
then,
to focus right on the lady's bust. And I guess Frankenstein's looking at the ring, because I was a little distracted at first, but it is the ring you're supposed to be paying attention to. Now, I said I would mention Batman again, and I know this movie is 2 years before Adam West Batman, but I got a little bit of Adam. Who's Robin again? Dick? No, no, the Burt Ward,
Hans.
right?
Yeah.
Burt Ward is the Robin, but I also got an idea, even though I didn't watch the show much, the Green Hornet and Kato with the black and the green masks they were wearing, covering their eyes.
Yeah, that would have. All right, so they wore the mask, they wouldn't be recognized. It would have worked a lot better if more than just those two people were wearing masks.
And the fact that he decides to outright confront the Burgermeister isn't helping either. At some point, the chief of police is there too, because he has a role in the story. And Frankenstein, he follows Burgermeister home. That's a funny scene. I like that.
So
the wife is in the bed.
Yeah. So actually, before he falls at home, they have to run away because he caused a big scene, and that's where they introduce the hypnotist named Zoltan, who is ironically hypnotizing someone to make them think they're Baron Frankenstein's monster. That's kind of a little Easter egg fun thing. Anyway, so yeah, so they get on stage for a minute, but nothing really happens to that. They run Zoltan off because he doesn't have a license. And then after they get back, that's when they go to the Burgermeister's house. He gets confronted pretty quick because the police are there. I'm not sure why. His wife's scared in the bed, just sitting there, and he runs in and he escapes through the window by tying all the sheets together. So I think he impresses her.
Well,
so
you
they're running away again.
You left out what he does previously. She's screaming while he's arguing with the Burgermeister about stealing his stuff, and he slams the door.
Shut up and close the door,
woman. That's like the only good line in this movie that I remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, then he's very kind to her as he's making his great escape.
After the first scene, he's a very honorable character, ironically. So him and Hans run away again to the mountains, and that's where they meet the girl in a cave, who I did not initially recognize was deaf.
Oh,
but because she's supposed to be deaf also, but she's deaf and mute. She helps them find a cave. I guess to say earlier in the film, they helped her as she was being harassed by some villagers. Not a big plot point, but that's probably why she decided to help them. And then while they're in the cave, she wanders off and starts making random noises, so she's not too mute. And then Frankenstein wanders around and he sees her, and then he sees that his prototype monster, or the monster, whatever you want to call it, is frozen in ice. So him and Hans, they carry it home, or they melt the ice, they carry it home. She follows like a puppy behind, and they take it to the chateau, and they restore it to life. But even though it's breathing, his brain seems to be unresponsive. Though it's not really unresponsive, it's just unresponsive in a 1950s kind of way. In terms of the understanding.
Did they establish for certain that he's got a heartbeat and that he's breathing? I must have missed that. I was a little confused on how that flowed.
They didn't point it out, but you could see his chest going up and down.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I like this scene. Hans recommends, or I want to set the scene up. So in the process of waking him up, there's a giant rainstorm. Electrical storm. And the equipment got bad electric wiring. And there's something wrong up on the roof, so he sent Hans up on the roof in this electrical storm with all this electrical equipment. He about set himself on fire. He electrocuted 4 times. Like yeah. So Hans about dies 3 or 4 times just trying to get the thing working. And he comes back down, and Frankenstein says, "Is it working?" He's like, "It better be." I hope so. So they send all the electricity through the monster, and that's when they figure out the brain isn't quite working right. And then Hans says, "We should use physical shock." And then Frankie says, "You idiot! I just put a bolt of lightning through him."
A little
Yeah.
frustrated there.
So then Frankenstein comes up with the idea to get Zoltan to help wake it up. But he needs a mental lightning bolt. So they go and they get him to
could
come
have done
over.
better.
Yeah, I agree. Made for TV movie. What can I say? So that they get Zoltan to come, and he successfully wakes the thing up. They find out that he won't listen to Frankenstein. He will only listen to Zoltan now, which it does coincide with the earlier hypnotism. Frankenstein kind of got fooled on that.
Seems a little convenient. I mean, I know they set the stage for it, but well.
Yeah, there's definitely plot holes in there. And then Zoltan uses the creature for his own gain. Tells him to go to town, find some gold. Apparently, they play with the idea that he gives them detailed instructions. So I'm not sure what kind of detailed instructions you can really give a monster. A reanimated monster.
I'm a little bit surprised. The monster seems to have pretty good vocabulary because he can understand a concept like Burgermeister and is it constable or just chief of police? I don't think he uses the word constable.
It was chief of police. He messed that one up. But yeah.
There's such a thing that you can, like, the monster can sort of understand directions or basic ideas, but he may even be able to understand street addresses because he's able to find the home of Burgermeister.
Yeah, apparently he can read. His critical thinking skills obviously lack. But he steals for Zoltan.
Whose brain is in that thing?
Yeah, I don't know. Let me see here. What was the phrasing? I think I wrote it down. Okay, yeah. So he tells the monster to go punish the bad men in the village. Quietly,
punish them.
Carefully, not be seen. Get the Burgermeister. Get the chief of police. Now, he goes down there, and he kills the Burgermeister, and I guess it's implied he kills his wife. That was not an explicit instruction, so it's a little unclear. And then he goes to the police station to get the chief of police. But it looks like one of the Yahoo officers in there has gotten out a chief of police uniform, a constable, has pulled out a uniform and is basically playing dress up with it, mocking
weirdo
the real ones. Yeah, I know. So he
like
gets
J.
coming
Jonah
to him
Jameson in that deleted scene from Spider-Man 2.
Yeah. So Frankenstein kills him and then goes back. Eventually, the chief of police, the true one, does get involved. And then Zoltan's really surprised that the monster killed him.
I just wanted you to punish him.
Kill him.
What is this, John Connor telling him to shoot him in the kneecap or what?
Zoltan's trying to clean him up. Frankenstein finds out, kicks him out. Zoltan comes in via the roof, tells the monster to let him in. He lets him in. You get a little scuffle. Creature is commanded to kill Frankenstein. Frankenstein's warding him off with some fire. Tells him to kill him again. He's like, I'm not going to go touch that fire. And he just kills Zoltan. So, stabs him pretty good.
I enjoyed that scene. He just sort of used one of the gate rails as a spear that he had pulled down.
Yeah.
And he just shoved it right into the late great Zoltan.
Yeah. Then after, it gets kind of messy around here. Like, they're just doing a little too much. Like, they're moving people, they're traveling way too much in the end of this movie. They should have just stayed in the castle. At the end of it, the creature gets drunk because it's got a headache again. Which I guess we should say, when they woke him up, initially he had a headache, and then he had to be like retold what to do. It was like a double. It was like two parts of the Zoltan waking him up. But anyways, he gets a headache, so the mute girl. I assume that's a socially acceptable phrase to use. I've been calling her that this whole movie. I'm not sure what else to say. But
they used to say that people were deaf and dumb. You don't say that anymore. So yeah, mute's a good word.
That's true. So you will be canceled, not me. Sounds good.
Hey.
But she makes him drink some brandy. I think it's brandy. He spits it out, breaks the bottle, then decides, actually, that was pretty good. So then he starts licking it off the floor like a dog. Then he runs over to the liquor cabinet. He drinks enough liquor to kill a bear. And he's rampaging around like your drunk uncle, destroying stuff. All the bad electricity is, all the bad wiring. starts going up in flames. Ultimately, Hans and the girl get out, and then there's lots of explosions. Frankenstein looks real sad, and then that part of the castle falls off into the bliss or the abyss, and we end credits. Frankenstein and the creature are dead. And you have to think, if you're Peter Cushing, he has to be thinking, man, this movie is so bad, this might actually be the last one I have to do.
Mm. I think he probably felt that way at certain points. Maybe in the Dracula films, he hated the script so much, he just started making his own stuff up.
So it's like I say, it's a Universal Films Frankenstein movie. But those Universal films were a lot shorter than this movie. This was a good hour and a half.
It is in color, though. That's nice.
It is. So I don't know if I have a lot of thoughts on this movie in terms of the overarching themes. It seems like I wouldn't say the Universal films had lots of themes, and I think this one kind of rubbed off on this.
Yeah. First couple of movies get credit for trying to say something. Most of the rest are a little bit more entertainment centered, and I appreciate that too.
But this movie's too serious to be a popcorn flick. I think that's part of the Peter Cushing is not a popcorn flick kind of actor. Not for his roles.
I don't know. He has a little popcorny action when he's driving that cart with the horse.
Oh goodness, you're right. I forgot about that. I made a note of that, and I forgot. It was the worst blue screen or green screen ever.
Oh, not ever. Maybe in this series, sure.
It felt the worst ever when I was watching it.
I enjoyed it though. I wanted some popcorn.
So he in one of the scenes where they're moving around way too much, he's going from a jail that he breaks out of back to the castle, and he steals a horse and carriage, and he's riding on it very dramatically, standing up like he knows what he's doing. Though obviously they're working around the fact it's probably not him. But I think to show that it is him, they have a couple of scenes where you have the forest background behind him, and he's standing up and you see his face. He's just kind of shaking up and down a little bit as if he's riding a real horse. I imagine it's the face you would make if you were doing like a true theater performance, and you're standing on the stage and they got you on the fake carriage and you're waving around your straps and you're bobbing up and down to make it look like you're riding across the town with the dramatic music playing in the background.
So it would have worked better on stage than it does here on film, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it seems unnecessary because, like I said, they had some good shots otherwise.
Oh yeah, the stunt work is great. The long shots from the back. They even have a little bit of the stunt man down in the cart who's sort of making the horse run but not getting out of it so as not to be seen. That looked pretty cool. And then you had all the extras having to jump out of the way of... And then I should add later, when the Baron Frankenstein is in the burning castle, he swings on a chain or a rope as if he's a swashbuckling hero. I like to see
Indiana
that.
Jones.
Yeah. I mean, I was cool with that.
What did you think of the monster and his violence? Did you like how he so gently killed the Burgermeister, slamming his head against the wall? So gently, but so many times that his face was eventually crushed.
The death scene left a lot to be desired. I thought it started okay because he did a little bit of WWF or WWE style wrestling where he seems to grab the guy and then he does the overhanded slap on the head. It's a little bit
saw it as more of a Will Smith kind of slap, though.
Oh, okay. The monster didn't really move his hips any, so I just thought it was more of the wrestling type overhead smash.
That's probably what they're going for, I will say.
But I like that, and then, it just deteriorated from there on the choreography. I didn't know if they just didn't have the right kind of stuntmen to pull off something more.
Well, it makes you wonder if the Burgermeister in real life was in such bad physical health that they really couldn't move him very quickly against any particular object.
That's why you get stunt people for that.
I enjoyed the town drunk. He was funny enough. I will say, and even at the end, when the monster's tearing the place apart, it's the most unorganized chaos scene you could possibly come up with. Everything was just exploding in all different directions. And
I
I guess
like
they're
that.
trying to get the idea that this monster bouncing around on walls and pulling on sticks and cords could somehow collapse the ceiling in that part of the castle.
Well, I have a theory on what happened there. So there's a moment when the monster is drinking as much of the brandy bottles as he can find that Frankenstein yells out, "No, no." I'm guessing he grabbed one bottle that wasn't brandy. Might have been nitroglycerin or something. And
Well, he did
then,
try to drink the chloroform.
oh, that would have KO'd him, right?
You would have thought.
Huh. I need to critique the Baron and Hans again when they are trying to wake the monster up, and I guess the late great Zoltan is there. They don't have him strapped at all. You should have learned your lesson from the last movie, assuming that movie happened. You should have strapped the monster down. Why in the world would you bring Hans back if you wanted to do something of a reboot for this one? You know,
Why would you hire an actor that has no personality to play Hans?
I can't answer that.
Go ahead.
Well, no, again, it's just an odd decision of why they decided to do things the way they did. Like, did they want a reboot or did they want a sequel?
Well, and they seem to want to do probably the stuff that they were initially wanting to do with Curse of Frankenstein, but weren't allowed to do. I wonder if they just kind of went back to those notes and made a movie out of it instead of focusing on the fact, hey, we've made 2 good movies. We can incorporate some stuff if we want to, but we really don't need to. And somehow this movie feels rushed, even though it had 6 years to be made. It's just like and it happens, but it's like it's just the craziest thing.
So I will say this: the most interesting part of this movie is the opening scene when he's still doing the body stealing to do an experiment in a basement. And it makes me wonder what happened before this movie. What kind of adventures did the Baron and Hans go on that we didn't get to
I
see?
understand.
And again, that
It
whole
needed to
idea
be
of an Incredible Hulk-style Frankenstein show that would have fit right in with whatever happened in this 10-year gap between when he created the monster and when they went back to the town.
I'm telling you, it should have been Frankenstein, the Walking Man. That should have been the name of the show.
And I'm disappointed that we didn't get to see any resolution to what happened after Frankenstein had body swapped and set up a new practice in London, which could have been really fun with, again, the whole Jack the Ripper style plot. They need body parts, and maybe Jack the Ripper is the guy who's their supplier, and maybe you get a Jack the Ripper versus a creature conflict.
Yeah. Well, I think when they did their Incredible Hulk style show, they could have done it with a modern Netflix style pacing, where a lot of times you'll have like 10 to 12 episodes for a season, and you kind of got two different stories within the season. You get like a shift midway through, right? So I think what you're talking about with the body swap, that would have been a good half season arc.
Yeah.
And then maybe he gets run off again, and it transitions into this. Okay, I'm broke. I gotta go back home and get the stuff, and then you get the Burgermeister parts of the episodes.
I like to think maybe Hans got a body swap off screen. That's why he doesn't remember stuff.
I think he had a brain swap.
Frankenstein has more of a scientific purpose in this movie, as in he actually wants to publish his theory on the origin of life. I don't know that he really wanted...
But he doesn't want to show off the monster this time.
Right. He's opposed to that on Zoltan, who thinks that would be profitable. Frankenstein doesn't want that.
Cushing is very good at playing a different version of the same character, and then creating another version of the same character, and then playing a different version of the same character. This series would be so bad without him.
Well, he is the saving
Or at
grace,
risk.
and they only replaced him
Or
once.
I should say, it would be at risk of being very bad. I should say that. Imagine if we had Gene Wilder in this role.
I guess you can imagine that, right?
But in these particular scripts.
Boy, played straight, I don't know, that'd be kind of rough. Or maybe it'd be great.
Well,
I don't know.
I don't think he could play it completely straight. I don't think he's capable of doing that. But it would be
Right.
like they would be horror comedies. I think they might work. Well, Adam, what movie's next?
If I recall my my continuity listing, it would be Frankenstein Created Woman.
That should be interesting. Have you seen it before?
No, I finally got around to purchasing the DVD this month, and I've never watched that. As I recall, it's not available legally on streaming platforms right now, and it may have something to do again with the distributor, who I'm forgetting, but it may be Paramount.
I think it is Paramount. If I'm not mistaken, this is the only Universal film.
For Frankenstein. Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah.
I watched this one from an 8-pack DVD that I bought years ago, and unfortunately it's 2 discs, and they're double-sided each, and they have 2 movies on each one. So Universal, really the only other Hammer monster movie they did would be the Wolfman one, and then I guess you could count Brides of Dracula, even though Dracula's not in that movie. Kiss of the Vampire, which doesn't have Dracula either, and Phantom of the Opera, in case you considered that one of the monster updates.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that the next one was Paramount. I'm assuming that because it was Paramount, they again couldn't use the Universal stuff anymore. And maybe that's why the movie was good again. They made them be good. But we shall find out next week.
I hate the Baron makes a lot of dumb mistakes in this movie, and you feel like the only reason there's any kind of plot conflict is his own dumb mistakes. And one thing that disappoints me about the plot tension in this is because Frankenstein never gets revenge on anybody, and it feels like he's a little bit of a bystander in his own movie, because Zoltan is the reason the monster wakes up. And Zoltan is the one who has a beef, for some reason, against the Burgermeister. Other than, they censured him.
They shut his show down.
That was the chief of police, and he doesn't even die. So the conflict is all about Zoltan and the townspeople. And Frankenstein is just in the middle of this somehow. And there's just a lot of things about this movie that you wish could have been done differently. But ultimately, it was done the way it was done, and now we're done with that.
Yeah. I think what you're saying is true. Frankenstein's a bystander in his own movie, but he's still got the most screen time of all the characters.
Yep.
So it's almost like we're walking through this town as Frankenstein, and we're watching the movie around us instead of really being in it. Other than that one scene where he tries to get Hans killed on the roof.
Yeah.
But I think he realized that. And that may have been why, when he was going up in flames, watching his monster get burned up, that he had that tear in his eye. He's like, man,
yeah,
we screwed this up. And now the budget's gone. But, all right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on the podcast. We'll be back next week. Same Franken time, same Franken channel.
Bye-bye.